Hey there everybody, and welcome back. For those of you that have been looking into creating a news app, whether it be for Android, iOS, or a web app, and you've been looking to do this completely free but haven't been able to figure out how, you've come to the right place. By the end of this video, we will cover how to do just that. Now, before we get started, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe and check out the channel for new content. Now, for those of you that have been following today, just like most of the other videos, we're going to be using Appgyver, which is a completely free platform, and we're going to be going through the process of creating this app in Appgyver. The process of actually exporting the application, I have a series that I made on YouTube. I'm going to put a link to this in the description. That's going to cover the process of actually publishing to the Google Play Store. This portion is just going to be walking you through creating the news app. So we're going to be using Firebase as the database storage, and then we're going to be using Appgyver for the mobile app itself. And just as a little bit of a teaser right here, I have a sign up page as a sample of something we could create pretty quickly. Now, before we get started, I do have a quick disclaimer. So this is going to be a news app, and because of that, it falls into very specific categories, not only on Google Play, but also in the Apple App Store and just on the internet as well. So if you're wanting to make an app about COVID-19 related information or updates or any other like diseases or specific information relevant to politics, etc., there are a ton of different rules, regulations, and guidelines, not just in the app stores, but also in different countries as far as what information you can actually display, how you display it, who it's advertised to, etc. So the disclaimer is essentially, I'm just creating this for educational purposes. I'm not responsible for how you use this information, where you publish it, or what you do with it. Always make sure that you're following all local, state, federal guidelines and regulations and policies for wherever you plan to distribute this. So just take heed to that, and again, I'm not responsible for how you use this info because news apps have a lot of different rules and regulations, so make sure you're looking up and following anything that you need to follow. Now, jumping straight in, what we're going to do is we're going to start off by going to appgyver.com. So I have this pulled up right here, and then we're just going to click login/sign up, and then we are going to go ahead and click create new. And here we're going to name the project. So typically I'll make this the name of the app. So here, let's just call it Check It Out News. And then we'll choose the default theme, although you can choose a different theme if you would like. You can customize this later. Now, while these things are loading, the next thing I would recommend doing is going to firebase.com. So before we jump over there, I'm going to give you the typical walkthrough of Appgyver and their interface. So this is going to be about 60 seconds. Feel free to skip ahead if this is something that you're already familiar with. So this is your new project for Appgyver. Starting on the left, you have all of your components or your component market. On the top left, you have your page navigation. So as you're adding pages, they'll appear up here. And then on the top middle, you'll have a couple of tabs we'll be accessing in a little bit. And then over here on the right-hand side, you have properties for the elements that you're selecting. For example, I clicked the paragraph. Here are the properties. And their page layouts at the bottom. So if you wanted to organize or reorganize, you can just drag and move things around here. You save up top every time you make your changes just to be safe and make sure you don't lose anything. And then you have your logic down here. So for example, if you wanted to click on this component and go to a different page, you would simply drag over this function, connect the two, and then make sure that you choose what page you want to navigate to here. And once you've selected it, you would click Save, and that's essentially been completed in the back end for you. Now, obviously, this is a very high-level overview. I just wanted to give you a quick walkthrough of the interface, and this is basically your sample UI or user interface, which is ideally what your app is going to look like. So that's the basics of Appgyver. The next thing we're going to do to make sure that we're prepared for this is we're going to jump over to Firestore or Firebase and get this set up, and then we'll come back to this screen and start working on this application. All right, everybody, since I've had a couple of questions about the Firebase setup, I'm going to walk all of you through it just to make sure that everyone kind of understands how these projects work. So when you first go to Firebase's website, so console.firebase.google.com, you'll essentially be prompted to log in if you haven't created an account, and that's pretty traditional sign up or setup process with your Google account. Then when you log in, you'll be able to create different projects for the different things that you're working on. So for this app, we're going to click Add Project, and then we'll just name it Check It Out News. And then we'll just click Continue. And then from here, you scroll down. Now, you can choose to enable or disable Google Analytics. I'm not going to complain about free analytics, so we'll just choose that default account for Firebase. And then it will say creating your project. This will take a second to load, and then from here, we're just going to do a really quick walkthrough of the Firebase dashboard just to show you how things will work and what we are going to need. This is going to be a very limited view, but once this says finishing up, you'll just click continue when that's done, and you're now in your project. So you'll have authentication, which is going to be your login to the app, Firestore database, which is what we're going to be using, and then you have real-time database and storage, and your project settings up here. So if you click project settings, typically here you'll see all this info. I'm in kind of like a junk account, so I don't plan to actually use this. I'll probably end up just deleting this in a little bit. But you'll see you can edit projects and all that fun stuff down there. And then you can check integrations if you need to. With it being a database, you can kind of add in additional integrations as needed. But we're just going to go over to Firestore database, and you'll notice that we don't have anything. So we're going to need to click create a database. And then you can start in production mode or in test mode. You can read about the differences if you're interested. And then we will just click next. And then you'll choose a location. I'm just going to use the default, although I would recommend following their instructions and choose one basically closer to you. We'll click enable. And then it'll say provisioning Cloud Firestore. Now, what we're going to do in the next screen, once this store is created, we're going to create sample data that we can use in our application. So this is going to be something called a schema. Basically, what we're doing is we're going to create a collection. We're going to name this. We'll just call this News 1. And then we'll go to Next. And then you're going to have your document ID. So I have a bad habit of basically just naming things the same thing. So we'll just put News 1. Here is basically the sample data that you want pulled in. So what do you want displayed in your app? So I would recommend skipping ahead a little bit, kind of looking through the UI, what makes sense, and then coming back. But I know we're going to need a title for the article. And then we'll just put title here, and then add field. We're probably also going to need a description of what's actually happening, so we can put description here too. The date will be captured. If you want to have a field for that, you can, but we can just keep it basic with title and description for now, and we'll click save. So you'll see you have the collection, the document, and the fields here. And then we're going to add one more collection, which we'll probably end up needing multiple. We're just going to call this News 2. And I just recommend naming these something you will easily recognize, because if you don't, you're going to struggle later on getting things mixed up. So we're going to put title, and we will put description. And the reason we are setting this up in Firebase is this is going to allow us to make edits without actually having to publish updates for the application. So if you think about all of the big apps out there that do offer news, bear in mind that most of those don't require an update every single time they publish a news article. Otherwise, you'd have hundreds or thousands of updates. So this is going to give us a schema, and the best way to describe that in the simplest way is basically that this schema is, we'll just call it the structure here. So it's going to say, okay, here's the collection, document, and the fields. It's basically mapping it, and then Appgyver will be able to use this information. So that's your super quick Firebase walkthrough. Let's jump back into the app and kind of get this integrated or moving. All right, at this point, we're going to jump back into the application now that Firebase is set up. So we're going to go through the UI piece relatively quickly just because I'm not quite sure how you want to design this app. So I'm going to put a couple of resources in the description. One is basically just the beginning video to the previously mentioned series. So it's a playlist on creating a social/sharing app. In that portion, or in the beginning of that series, I walk through creating a sign up or sign in page. That way I don't have to constantly remake that in every single video. So I'm going to put that in the description below, as well as the link to publishing the actual application to Google Play. So between those two videos and this, you should be able to kind of do everything you need to do. Now, jumping straight in, we're going to move this title up here, which was created by default in this page. We'll go over here to content, and we're just going to put something like welcome. And this will be your home page or landing page. You can go over to style and really change this to look like whatever it is you want it to look like. We'll just put this in the center. And then down here, we'll click on properties and we'll delete all this. And we'll put something like select the categories below to see relevant news. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to make sure that we have something enticing. So typically with a lot of news apps, they're going to have images that kind of draw you to specific sections. So we're going to put these large list items, and we're going to drag this in and see how big this is. That looks like a pretty good size. So we can actually hit Control-C. It should also be Command-C, I believe, on a Mac, and paste a couple of these to copy it below. These little dialogues will disappear over time. And here's where we're going to change the content here. So let's put maybe the top news categories. So let's think of, we'll put electronics. And then this one will be, we'll just put politics. Put religion. And then we'll just continue on, and these are just categories that I've often seen in different news apps. And then here we could just put MISC. So then we'll go up and we will click in this box and we'll put in the description. So we'll put click here for all things electronics. And again, you're going to want to make this a little bit catchier, but I'm just kind of trying to show you how to get the content started. Click here for all things politics. Click here to see news about religion. Food. Click here for all things food related. And then miscellaneous, we'll just put random news. All right, so the next thing that we need to do is find some images to make this look a little bit more attractive. So we're going to save our changes, and then you have a couple of different choices for where to pull up your images. What we're going to use is Unsplash. So if you go to unsplash.com, they have great high-resolution images that are typically able to be used for commercial use anywhere. Now, double check before you actually start using these images and make sure that you're able to use them for whatever commercial purposes you need them for, or whatever you need them for. Just always double check and make sure that you're not going to get in any trouble for using something you are unable to or shouldn't. So we're going to go to search for high resolution photos. Let's just type in electronics for the first category. And you're going to want to find something that, like this, for example, it has multiple electronic devices, just something vague enough to be a little bit of everything. Now, this looks like it's going to be watermarked because there may be a premium version. So we're going to try this one in a new tab and see what this looks like. It's still going to have the watermark, that's fine. We'll just copy as is because we're not actually going to be publishing this. So we're going to click copy image address. Now, a couple of things to note. When you're putting in images, you have a couple of choices. You can use this button right here to hard code an image by uploading a file. However, if you do this, the image is built into the app and increases the app size. Your other choice is to click this button right here, go to Formula, And then you're basically just replacing what's in quotes, this link here, with the link to the image. Now, the downside to this URL that we're using is if this ever gets changed or the image is removed, we will no longer have access to it, so you may need to save the image elsewhere. But we're just going to click Save and Save for now, and you'll see we have our little image. So we'll speed things up a little bit. So our next thing is going to be politics, so we're going to go through, and I'm going to speed the video up now that you've seen that process. I'm going to pull up an image for all of these different categories, and then we'll go ahead and get started with the next step. All right, now that I've gone ahead and added images for everything, I kind of reorganized, so religion's most important to me, so I put that at the top, and then basically just kind of put everything else in a sort of a random order. Now at this point, this doesn't look like a very attractive app in my opinion, so a couple things you may want to do is go to the page layout. So when you select this, you can name the page, so we'll just call it Home, but then you can also go to Style, and maybe, for example, we want to choose a background color just to make things look a little better. So I would recommend trying this out on a couple different devices. Appgyver does have a really cool preview app, so you can download that, log into your account, and see this on your mobile device. We'll just choose like a light bluish color for now. So now that we have that taken care of, next up is to actually set these up to do something. So right now we just have a list. These actually don't link anywhere. So first things first, we are going to build out the page for this religion section, and then you can kind of follow those steps for the rest. So what we'll do is we're going to click on the top left, and we're going to click Add New Page, and you're going to name this page, for example, in this case, we're going to name it Religion, but it would be whatever topic you're making. And then up at the top here, you would basically just go to Content, and you don't have to do things exactly the way I'm doing them. I'm just showing you you can align everything to the right. Maybe you want to put it in the center. You can change font over here in Style and adjust all of these settings. And then you would basically start putting in maybe like a quick description of what this is going to cover. So I'll just put a placeholder here. And then next up would be actually creating those news articles. So what we're going to do, because I thought maybe a good idea for this would be to go ahead and make one more addition to these two news sections. So right now we have these two. I'm going to add one more field, and we're going to put image URL. I think that this would be very, very useful. So for example, let's just look up a couple of images to put in this page. So I'm going to grab a quick picture of a Bible, and we'll right click, and we're just going to copy image address. And then we're going to put that in the value field and click add. And then news 2, we're going to add a field, and we're going to call it the same thing. And the reason we're doing this is when you're publishing, you want there to be images on these pages. So for example, if on this page we decided to do item list or image list item, that looks a little small, so maybe we want to stick with the large image list items. But if you notice here, we have a title and a description, but you're probably going to want to have a little image to attach as well, just to kind of entice users to click on it. So we will go back here, and we're going to honestly just paste in the same image URL just so we have these. And then these collections have been updated. So we can go ahead and close this. And now what we're going to do is we have to set this up a specific way. So you have a couple of choices. You can let the page automatically scroll, or what we can do is we can bring over a scroll view, and then we can drop everything into this scroll view, which will essentially act as a container that is scrollable. Now, one more thing that we're going to do just to be safe, because I like to keep things organized, is we're going to drop a container in the scroll view, and this is going to contain our news items. So now what we're going to do is we have to connect the actual data variable, or we have to get this configured to work with this database. So next up, what we're going to do is actually get this configured. So at this point, what we need to do is we need to set up this API information. So we're going to go to project settings, and we can kind of look through here, but really what we're trying to do is we're trying to find our API key. So you'll see right here, there isn't one for this particular project, so we are going to have to get that figured out and set up. So we're in here now, and we're going to go to rules, make sure that this is okay. So we're going to allow read and write, and we're going to publish that. This does create open database rules, so anyone can edit it. So you're going to want to make sure that you have rules that work for you. And then you can check those rules and things and how they work here. You can check indexes and usage. But next, what we're basically going to do is make sure that we can get this API key, and we'll walk through getting this data variable set up. So before we do that, we're going to jump into the Data tab, and you can click Add Data Resource, and you'll see we have a ton of different options. I'm going to go with the standard REST API direct integration. However, if you want to look into the documentation, you can also use the Google Firebase / Cloud Firestore option. Now, for this particular option, because this is a newer feature, it's probably better. We'll change things up, and we'll use this option instead right now. But if you wanted to use the REST API integration, you would put your resource ID here, your description, and then you're going to put in your resource URL. And then under the get collection, that's where you're going to put in the path. So it's the second half of the URL. You would put documents here, just like this. Basically what this is doing is it's telling the system what kind of document is coming back through. And then you can run a test and set a schema from the response. So we're going to skip that because it's relatively straightforward. You would basically just click Add Data Resource, REST API Direct Integration. You'll put the ID here, the short description here, the first half of the URL. So for example, if it is this, you would just cut this part. You need to check the Firebase documentation for this. So you would click Go to Docs and make sure that you have the correct URL set up. And then the second half of the URL, which obviously this wouldn't be the right case here, but that would be this portion. So the first half will be pasted in here. Second half will be pasted in here. Documents, the text would just be pushed here. And then you'll go to Test and click Run Test. It'll bring back a response. And then you'll go to Schema. And actually, when you're in test, it should have set schema from response. And then you can look at the schema here. So that's relatively self-explanatory. That method is already in the series that I made, which is going to be put in the description below. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do things a little differently, and we're going to try to set it up using the data, what they call the data configurator, and we're going to set it up for the actual Firebase storage, just because that's a newer feature. All right, since we decided to change gears a little bit and use Google Firebase for the actual new data resource, because this is a somewhat new feature from Appgyver. But again, the link's in the description if you want to use the API. I used this in that series creating that social/sharing app. So feel free to reference that for that specific piece of this, we'll just call it the puzzle. So we're going to click, if you were to click, I should say, here, you'll see that we need to configure the Firebase connector first. So we're just going to go to connectors. We're going to turn this on, and then we're going to do the web app configuration. So project ID, I've copied this over. You'll see if we're in the general settings here, it just says project ID right here. So now what we need to do is get the web app info. So we're just going to, again, in our settings. So if you're up in, we'll just say in the authentication page, or you could drop down to your Firestore database, you'll just click this little wheel right here and click project settings. And we're going to scroll down and click on this button here. And this is the web app. So we'll name it. So we'll just call it Check It Out News. Register app. And when you do this, you will have the ability to essentially see all of these web app settings. So this is everything that you're going to need. So you'll see now we have an API key, an authentication domain. I'll delete all of this from Firebase after this video, just because this is a test app. So let's see what we need next. And that's going to be the auth domain. So basically you're scrolling through and you'll see we have that right here. So we will just highlight copy, come over here and paste. Then we need the measurement ID. So that's actually this one right here. So we'll highlight, copy, come over here and paste. Then we need the storage bucket. That is right here. And then we need the messaging sender ID. So messaging sender ID is right here. And then we'll copy that. Come over here and we will then paste that right here. And then if you want, which I would highly recommend doing, you can also set up your iOS app and your web app and Android app configuration. So this is highly, highly recommended to make sure everything's working, especially if you plan to go across all platforms. The last thing you want to do is set this up for Android, not set it up for iOS, and then have an issue when you try to publish to the iOS, to the Apple App Store. So basically, to do these, we're just going to do the web app and finish with this, and then I'll walk you through what that means. But basically what those are doing is setting this configuration up that we're doing right now for the web app for those two specific platforms. So we're going to put the this is the API key here. Then we'll do the web app ID next. And then these are typically going to be in here. You just kind of have to match up the names, and you're only copying what's in between the double quotes. So web app ID here. So this has essentially been set up. We have all of this information. So we're going to save real quick. And then I'm going to walk you through, if you want to set up Android and iOS, we can essentially just go back to console. And then we'll scroll down, and here you'll see we have the web app. Now we would click Add App. You would simply choose Android or iOS. You'll fill out this information here, and then you'll go to Next. So let's just put com.checkit.checkit. Obviously, this wouldn't be the information you would put in, but we're just going to put this just to show you what the configuration looks like. And then once that's set up, you have the option to download the JSON file. I have this already opened up here in, so I'm using Visual Studio Code. You can basically just open the file and this is what's going to populate. So if we click on this JSON file, you'll see we can open it. And then this is the information. And all you need to do is repeat the process for Android configuration. So you just click this. You'll type in the information from this file, and then you'll do the same for iOS. So pretty simple process. We'll skip that for now. We're just testing on a web app, but again, make sure you do it for those corresponding platforms. And then when you've finished this up, you can hit the little X, make sure you've saved your changes, and we have essentially set up that connector. So next is going to be setting up the actual data. So we're going to just exit the app and click back into it essentially. So we're just going to go back into Check It Out News. And then we are going to click on the Data tab. So you'll see connectors, that info is still there. So now we're going to go to Add Data Resource. We're going to go to Google Firebase /Cloud Store. And here's where we're going to go ahead and start setting up this data resource and getting it configured. All right, so now we're essentially just connecting the dots. So we're basically going to create this data resource now. Again, all we've done up to this point is made sure that we have the connector set up for Firebase. So we're basically making sure that we have it set up for all applicable configurations. I just did it for web app, which is where I'm testing, but you would also want to do iOS and Android if you need to. So at this point, we're going to go to the Data Resource tab, and we're going to add a data resource, and then we're going to click Google Firebase. You'll notice that message at the bottom is gone now because we have done those steps. So next up is naming the resource. So naming conventions are really important because you don't want to get lost or forget what is what for your application. So essentially what we're focusing on at this point is making sure that we're naming everything and we don't get lost or confused. So for this resource name, I'm just going to call it News1 because I'm not very original. And then the Firestore collection name is News1. Now, bear in mind that you're following the collection name here. So it's safe to just go ahead and assume that we need this to be case sensitive. So we're putting News1, and then you'll notice the resource schema. ID here is by default, so we can ignore that. We're adding the properties. The properties are, when you select the document, what's in the actual fields here. So every time we add a document, this is going to be the newest news update. So we'll see what that looks like in the UI. But here we're basically adding description, image URL, and title. So we'll go back over here. We're going to put title, and you can just click the plus sign. And this is a text property, so we don't need to change anything there. The next one is going to be description, and then we will click plus. And then this is going to be image URL. And then we'll click plus. And then we will just click Save Data Resource. And then from here we will click Save as well. And then you'll need to repeat those steps if you have other resources. So basically this news collection, we are going to be publishing everything that's in this section here within the news collection. So you could separate these collections. So for example, if you wanted this to be religion, the next one to be politics, the next one to be whatever it is, that's another way to organize it. And then these would be the names of whatever those updates are going to be. So at this point, we have the data resource set up. Now what we need to do is we need to add a data variable. So we have our page here. And essentially all we have is our scroll view with our title, our paragraph, and then a container. And we have the large image list item here. So again, if you wanted to replicate this, you bring over a scroll view, you drop your content inside just by simply bringing it over. And then you could have your container. And the reason I'm putting everything in a container is because we're going to do a repeated item. So I'm going to give you an example, and then I'm going to delete all of this, and we'll just kind of go through it together. So we have the scroll view so that a user can scroll within this information. And then what we have is our container. So everything in this repeated item set is within that container. It's not necessarily required, but it's easier because if you can imagine, you're going to have multiple items. So there's going to be your news update for today, then tomorrow, then the next day, and that list is going to continue to grow. So it's easier to contain in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to select this scroll view too. I'm just going to remove it. And we're going to go up here to this large image list item. So we need to add the data variable first. So we just go to the variables tab up here by moving this slider. We'll go to data variables, add data variable, and you'll notice we have News1 because we just set up that data resource. Now don't get scared if you see that it says News11. It adds a 1 automatically to the end. Don't worry about that at all. And we're just going to click Save. Now what you're going to do is you're going to move the slider for variables, and we are now going to allow or set up this item to repeat. So what this repeat does is for every instance that there is something here, there's going to be a repetition of this item here. So to set this up over here, you'll see we have repeat with. You'll start by selecting this. You'll select data and variables. We'll go to data variable. We'll click on the news 11 and click save. And then what we can do is we can now set up these options here. So for description text, we're going to put data item in repeat. We'll click on this and we can choose the description option and we can click save. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go to title, data item and repeat, and then we are going to go to title and click save. If you want, you can set a preview here. The reason I don't is because I want to see what this information looks like when it populates. So you'll see it says this right here. I want to see what it really looks like. Now, next up, what I want to do to make sure that this works and it's not pulling or somehow caching a different image, we're going to go find a different image. So let's just select this one here. And I'm going to right click and I'm going to copy image address, and we'll use this in a minute. So for here, you'll see we have an image source. Now, what we're going to need to do is we're going to go to data item and repeat, current. Now you'll notice we can't click on image URL here. So we're going to have to get creative and do a little bit of a workaround. So if we go back to the description and we click on select binding type and we click on formula, this is your shortcut to always figure out the formula for a specific item. So we're not going to change this. We're simply going to copy it. So we'll highlight Command or Control C, and we're going to close out of this. And then we're going to go to image source, and we're going to go to formula. And then we're going to delete everything in formula. We're going to paste in what we just copied, except right here we're going to start typing, and you'll notice that there's repeated.current image URL. So this is our way of doing a little bit of a workaround to make sure that the image URL populates, which basically renders the image for that URL. So now what we're going to do is we're going to click Save. The tricky part is, how do we know that this actually worked? You're going to notice that it's just the same item repeated. This is always, from my understanding, going to look like this, even if that's not what those items are. So to test this, we're going to go to Launch, and then we're going to open App Preview Portal. If you want to view this on a mobile device, there is a preview app for Appgyver. And we're going to go to Check It Out News. Now, you're going to notice this looks like this web page that doesn't look like it's formatted very well. So the trick, if you want to view something as a mobile page in Chrome, you can right-click and click Inspect. Now, when you do this, it opens up this console. Don't get nervous about all this code over here. You don't need to worry about that. We're simply going to click on Toggle Device Toolbar, and then it gives you the option to choose what kind of a device right here you want to view this as. So we can just click Galaxy S5 as an example, and you'll see it lets us scroll and view it as a mobile device. Then we'll click on this religion page right here, and now we're realizing nothing's happened. And this is because we haven't finished everything just yet. So the last step, at least for this portion, is to go to the home page, and we need to connect the pages. That's why it's useful to have the preview set up in a separate tab. So we're going to click on this, and then we're going to go to the logic. And just like I said in the beginning of the video, we'll drag over open page. And sometimes it doesn't grab it the first time around. And then you simply connect these little nodes right here. And then on navigation, you go over when you select it. Page pops up right here, and you simply select the page you want to navigate to. So I've only added one other page. As you add more pages, this will populate, so you can choose whatever pages you want. So you can repeat this step for every single one of your categories. Now we simply click on Save. And then when we go over here, this should refresh automatically. So now when we click on this, you'll see this actually opened up. So we now have this web page right here with all of the information that we need. So this first item populated. Well, question is, what happens if we add something else? So let's go here, and just to test it out, we've clicked on this collection. And then over here, we're just going to click on Add Document. So we'll call this Newest Update. And then we're just going to try to keep the naming convention the same. So we're going to put title, description, and image URL. So here we're going to put it worked. And then we're just going to put it did. And then we're going to go back to this new picture, right click and click copy image address. And we're going to come back over to this page here. and we're going to paste this address in, and we're going to click Save. Now we're going to come back to this page, and sometimes it doesn't refresh automatically, so we're just going to refresh this here and see if this newest item pops up, and it did. So this is what I meant when I said you want to keep your information set up to where it doesn't, you don't want to have to put out a new app update every single time. So you'll see we put, it worked and it populated here, and here's the idea. When you're creating this news app, News 1, I should have probably named this the category. So this would be religion. News 2 could be politics. News 3 could be whatever that category is. So each collection is going to be a different section in your interface. So if we go back to the home page, religion is a category, electronics, politics, etc. Each of those will be a collection. And then within those collections, each document would be a news article with your details for that specific article or whatever that update's going to be. So at this point, you see we actually have this set up and everything's working as intended, but maybe you want a little bit more. So if you just want this basic description, that's fine, but maybe you want this to actually open in a new page. So this is going to get a little trickier. It's not incredibly difficult, but we can go ahead and work through this next. And basically, we just want, for every instance, when someone clicks on this, I want to see a full-size page with these details. So let's go ahead and get started building that out. So we are going to minimize this. And at any point, if you have any questions about how these things are updating or working, it's probably better just to restart the video. Often it's just one small step that essentially took you down the path where you have the same end result, but maybe things aren't updating. For example, if you're troubleshooting right now, and let's just say you're following along and you added a document and nothing changed, well then what I would recommend is making sure that you followed these steps and named everything correctly. Otherwise, it may not recognize everything. So let's jump back to the Appgyver tab here. And we are going to go over to this page, and we're going to find out how to make each one of these items pull up their respective individual item pages. All right, so at this point, we have to first create a new page for this information to be displayed, and we will call this religion item. Now, again, naming is incredibly important. It's really easy to get lost on this info. So, lost in the info, I should say. So what we're going to do here is, I'm going to leave the page as is. So we're going to be using something called page parameters now. So we're going to click Save, and I just dragged this image over as this was the image that essentially was already there. So basically what we're going to do is, we're going to set it up so this page is kind of dynamic. And what I mean by that is, if you click on the first news article, this page will have that info. But if you click on the next one, this same page will have all that info. This way you don't have to create 100 pages and connect them all. So to do this, we click the first item. You'll format it in the typography section however you feel. But just for time's sake, we are just going to leave it as is. So we're going to go to Variables, and we're going to go to Page Parameters. So we're going to have a parameter, we're just going to go ahead and add 3. So parameter 1, I'm sure you probably guessed, is going to be title. And then parameter 2 is going to be the description. And I want to make a note that if you're following along, you can have more than one or more than 3 fields here. Feel free to add as many as you want. These are just what I think are going to be the most common. And then this one is going to be image URL. You can name these differently if you want. I don't recommend it only because if you mess something up and you have to go back over, it's going to be a lot more difficult if you have to say, okay, wait, what is this one, what is this one, and what is this one? So we've added those names. So now we can go back to the view, and you'll see that the image disappeared. Don't be scared. It's still in the tree. There's just no image associated. So we are going to go to the headline, the content. We are going to go to Data and Variables, Page Parameters, and you'll see we have a title option. Again, I don't change the preview. If you want, you can. Then we're going to go to the description, content, and then we're going to go to data and variables, page parameter, and description. And then for the image, we're going to click on this source, data and variables, and page parameter. And you'll see it's not compatible. So, as I'm sure that you're guessing, that means we have to do our little workaround. So we'll click on description, and we're going to go back to select binding type. We'll click on formula, and you'll see it's just params.description. So just to show you another way to do this, we'll go to the image, and we'll go to source, formula, and here we'll just select in this, and we're just going to type params, and then all the parameters that are on the page will populate here. So we'll just go ahead and select, actually that was the wrong one, we're going to select the image URL and save. If it shows up in red, don't worry about it, and if nothing shows up here, don't worry about it. We'll see how this works in a second. So now what we need to do is we need to connect everything. So we're going to go back to this page. Now bear in mind that because this is a repeated item, you don't need to worry about the other instances. And if you're wondering, I only have 1 or 2 items in Firebase, why are there 3? This is just the default to show that it's continuing. So we have to tell this what to do. So when we click on this, if you see, we'll have a couple of choices. So first up, we need to set a couple of options. So we see that we have title label, description label, and image source. So when this is opened, so what we did here is we just selected this item, and we brought up this menu here, and all we're doing is bringing over open page. We're going to connect the nodes, and then we're going to select the new page to make sure that it knows what to open, and click save. And then we'll save again just to be safe, and we're going to minimize this. And now when we select this item, you're going to notice we have a couple of options in here. So you'll see we have these repeated with, and then we have this option here. So now what we're essentially going to be setting up is we need to make sure that when everything is brought over, that it is sent over properly. So we need to make sure that the data is actually connected with this new page. So we have a couple of options. Again, make sure you go through your style and properties and everything else. But what we're essentially doing at this point is we're making sure that all of this data is sent over. So, all right, so what we're essentially looking for at this point is going to be in the logic section. So once you've configured everything over here, we're going to make sure that we have this first item selected. Click on Show Logic. You'll click on Open Page. Now you'll notice this may not be there before the page variables are created, or the page parameters, I should say. But after they're created, you should see these parameters listed right here. Regardless of their order, you're basically just going to be connecting those parameters. So effectively what we've done is we've said this item takes you to the item page. On that item page, there are parameters for description, title, and image URL. But that doesn't tell us what to display there. So what we have to do is, while we're navigating to the page, we're going to tell the next page what to populate. The beautiful thing about how Appgyver has this set up is you really just set it up once, and then all the items in repeat follow that property. So we're just going to click on description, data item in repeat, and we're basically just telling it, pull in the description from this current page. So essentially, if your description is very long and overflowing, as I'm sure we're all aware, most news apps out there nowadays, they don't just have this list view. You can click on the page and see more details. You can then click image URL, data item in repeat, current, image URL, save. And then we're going to do just what you'd expect, go to title and save. So now what we've done is told this what to send over. Now I want you guys, as always, I want all of you just remember to be creative with this. You are not limited to just these 3 items. If in the religion item page or the other pages you're making, you want to have 20 different page parameters, nothing is stopping you. Add those in. The point is, when you click the item, you tell Appgyver, open this page, and then you tell Appgyver what data items in repeat are going to send to the page parameter so that it can be viewed on that page. And again, we're basically just recycling description, image URL, title. So what we're going to do now is we are pretty much done with this portion here. So we can collapse this and just kind of see how everything works. So we've already clicked save. So let's refresh on this previewer page. And we'll navigate back to the home page. We'll click this first religion option, and then we'll click it worked. So you'll see we have our title here, it did, and then our image. So if we go back to the home page and click on this, we'll click on title, and you'll see the new description, title description, and this image work here. Now, just to verify that all of this is working, I recommend as often as you can testing things. So we're just going to find one more. So this image, right click, and we will click copy image address. And then let's just put this in a real life situation. This is our user, we'll call him user A. They're logged into the app and they want to see the newest update. So what you would be doing is you'll log into your Firestore, you'll click on News 1, and then we'll make this the newest. And then we're basically just going to add all the info just like we would normally. So title, field would be description, and then image URL. On the left, it's important. I like to keep these with the same naming convention. But over here, we could put breaking news. And then we could put this is what happened. Or we'll put this is what is going on. And then in the image URL, we'll paste that image. And then we'll click save. Now this has been saved. We're going to go ahead and click on this. And you'll see this newest one is up here at the top. Breaking news, this is what's going on. When we click it, it brings up this page here. So now we have what would loosely be considered our fully functional mobile application. Now again, this is only covering the basics. For example, clicking down here does absolutely nothing. So what I'm recommending you do at this point, if you've been able to follow along with me, when you click on this, everything should be working, and just click on each one, make a couple, make sure that they work. And then what you're going to do is essentially try to restart this video, or at least go back to where we made this first page, and you're going to redo all of these steps for each one of these options, and then you're going to be all good to go. Now, when you're making this application, the last bit of advice I want to give you is set it up however you want. You can have any item you want linked to whatever page. So for example, if you'd rather have a button, drop the button in, click on Show Logic, and you can easily just click and drag over Open Page, connect the node, select this, and choose what page it takes you to. So it's very, very simple to navigate to new pages. Choose whatever components and set that up however you would like. And then the next point is you can click on your page layout to adjust the style up here and change whatever you want. And you can have these items set up however you prefer. For example, if you wanted to add a row, you could drop this over, and then you can add X number of cells to this row. And then you could drop maybe an image in the first cell, maybe you want your paragraph in the next one, and maybe you want your title in the middle. And then you would simply click on cell 2 and go over to properties, and you have the option to do repeat with just like we did before. And then you can make each one of these the item in repeat, just like we did with these steps up here. So the reason I'm showing you this is I basically want you to know that you don't have to do things exactly the way that I did it here. You can choose whatever you think is the most attractive. The point is you're going to need to have your links to each page for each topic. And if you want, those pages could then have subtopics. And then the point is, once you get down to it, if you want to have it set up to where it's connected to Firebase, you'll follow all of these steps. And the whole idea is you need to have your collections set up first, and then at least one sample document to make sure that everything is working and it's pulling the info over. And then once you know for a fact it's pulled over, you can then essentially publish this to the App Store, again, making sure that you're following all guidelines, rules, laws, regulations, etc. And then you'll have all of your collections here. So the idea is, outside of big updates, you can just go in here and then add a document, and then you'll have your title for whatever that option is. So for example, this update here, you'll have the title, and you'll say, okay, here's my big update, so we'll call it 10-18-2021. Description is basically your article. So you type out whatever you want, and then your image URL is just your image that, again, making sure it can be used for this purpose or Creative Commons images, etc. Just make sure you're allowed to use them for whatever you need them for. And then that'll populate here on this page. And that's really all that there is to it. So at this point, I would just recommend that you go back to the beginning, or at least back enough to where you're seeing where I started out with this page here. The good news for you is you already have a lot of the framework built out. So at this point, you need to evaluate, okay, how many sections do I have? You're going to need an item page for ideally each one of these sections. So you'll click up here. I have a religion item, so you're going to want electronics item, politics item, food item, etc. You'll make the page parameters on all of those pages. You'll make sure that you've added the data resource, the data variable, you've connected everything, and that you can click over. So at this point, like I said, just go through, repeat those steps for however many sections. You can have this set up however you want throughout your app. Just make sure your data variables are set up. If you're switching to new pages, you will need to add those data variables to the new pages and set up your variables accordingly. Once you have your application finished, I will have the link in the description to where you can actually go ahead and publish this application to Google Play. But going through the process, if you need to, just click on the launch button and you can open that preview portal. And again, check out the link in the description. That publishing YouTube video, which I'll put there, walks you through finalizing the process within Appgyver and then putting the app in Google Play. If you're looking to get it in the Apple App Store, you can check out the Appgyver forums for doing that, or web apps. I just wanted to focus on Google Play for now. As always, if you have any questions or comments, drop them in the comment box below. If you have any ideas for future videos, feel free to drop those in the comment box below. I'll do what I can, and I'll see you all in the next video.